Hello and welcome to another Great Shouts marketing growth interviews. I'm Ed Davidson, fractional head of marketing, and your host for these sessions. This series, the chats we're having are all about how marketing and growth changes when you move from a startup to a scale-up business. And these are good warts and all interviews with marketing leaders and business owners who've been through that process. We hope this is going to be really useful for CEOs and founders who are often moving from that startup stage to the scale-up stage. And today we've got Rin. She's got so much experience. She was editor at the Trinity Mirror Group. Lecturer at Bath Spa University as well.
I mean, that makes me sound really posh, but yeah, I did do that for a while.
And now runs RH&Co. Strategic brand copywriting agency. She's also produced so much great content in the kind of world of startups and scale-ups and kind of run panels as well. So Rin, great to have you on.
Thank you for inviting me. Good to be here.
Good stuff. So the first question I normally ask to kind of baseline this discussion is, how do you define when a startup moves into that kind of scale-up level of growth?
I think for me, the important thing about scaling up is that you can replicate something without necessarily having to put quite the same amount of input in. So, realistically, you might still have to put in a little bit more, but it shouldn't be like, okay, I'm going to double up the amount of output and it's going to have to double up the amount of budget. I think you need to get to a point where you can double the amount of output by maybe, 10% increasing your amount of budget. So I think that's what's key in the startup to scale up world.
Makes sense. And do you kind of see when you're working with those startups that are making that jump, different kind of view, especially on kind of KPIs for content and the content that you're producing? Is it more of a kind of brand metric and awareness at a later stage rather than just getting leads in an earlier stage?
Yeah, well, in a way, sometimes it's the opposite. It very much depends, because sometimes at the beginning they're like, we just want to get known. Nobody knows who we are. Let's just get out there. So it's sort of like, it's like anything. They'll take anything, any kind of awareness. Whereas a bit later, it's like, okay, we really need to start making some money here, or maybe we've got some shareholders and they're demanding different things. So it can go the opposite way. So at the beginning, it's brand building, and later, obviously, brand building continues, but they've got more pressure to generate those leads.
Yeah, interesting. Are you involved at that kind of early stage around the kind of value proposition and defining that kind of value proposition? And are there particular kind of times and stages where that value proposition is reviewed as company scales up?
Yeah, definitely. So there's two arms to what we do. And the first is to help people to clarify and communicate their message. So that can be in the very early stages of a startup. Sometimes what happens is, and we did this panel discussion a while back, and Tristan, who we both know, was one of the people, and he talked about having a minimum viable brand. And I really like that as a description, because the idea of going, actually, when you're starting off, you don't want to spend 20 grand necessarily like defining your brand, because it could be changing every 5 minutes as you explore and you kind of get some traction and you get some feedback from the market. So you might want to start somewhere, just kind of go, okay, put a pin in it. We're going to do that. And then like a year later or whatever it is, you might want to come back to it. So yeah, I think that's important. You're going to have to redirect me back to the question, because my brain's just gone down a rabbit hole.
No, it's all good. Yeah, around the kind of that value proposition and that changes over time. Yeah. I suppose the other kind of angle to it as well is the customers often at an earlier stage is a particular group or cohort of customers, like those kind of early adopters. And then maybe you scale and you kind of pull the trigger on more growth. There's maybe wider groups of customers. So that message change with those different groups.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, especially, as you get into the sort of scale up phase, obviously you've proved that a concept works, which means other people are going, oh, that looks good. That we're gonna do that. We're gonna jump on that. So suddenly your message of being the one company that did this thing is not going to work anymore, because there's other people doing it. So then you have to find other reasons why people should stick with you. And also, I think sometimes as people scale, they go from that kind of like, look at us, little startup brand, and people buy into it as a little indie brand and they love it. And then suddenly it starts. And interestingly, I think that's something that I think people should try and hold on to for a lot longer. And it normally dies a death when it gets bought out. but probably at that point you don't care, right? Because you've got lots of millions and you can go away and retire to your island. But I think that keeping hold of some of that kind of cultural stuff, it's how do you expand the messaging so you get new people and more people and kind of grow, but actually how do you hold on to what made you and special? So I think about like I don't know if you come across Snag Tights. They're a fantastic fashion brand, and there's this really little indie brand. I don't know how big they've actually got, but they've always to me felt still very like, like you feel like you could actually go and meet them. I think Lucy and Yak have managed to do the same thing. I don't know why I'm now thinking of all the fashion brands, but do you know what I mean? Still having that kind of local feel, that small feel. So yeah, I think that can be important. But
And it's really interesting, isn't it, to keep that feel? Often, early stages, kind of the brands are very much tied to the founders or co-founders, and they're a reflection of them and their personality, and also they have, that level of passion for the product, so it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
It's interesting to, I suppose, see if that scales. So there's still that level of resonance that you have with those founders, especially as other wider people come in. But it's really interesting, that point around culture, and if that can be maintained and that flows through the brand mission and also within the product, it helps you stand out.
And I think that's the thing, like, brand is about so much more than, as we know as marketers, it's not just the logo, and it's not even just the tone of voice, but it's everything. It's the sort of living, breathing entity of that business. And that obviously includes the people. Obviously, you've got a SaaS platform, people aren't necessarily engaging with individuals in the same way as maybe with a service-based business, for example. But there's still, if you're saying one thing like on your website and all the rest of it, but actually internally the belief isn't there. So you're like, oh, we're a really cool brand. And then internally everyone's like, I don't know, 70, like that doesn't fit. So there's got to be, and I hate the word authenticity, but your brand has to reflect who the business actually really is. Your values, your beliefs, your kind of just philosophy on the world, because that shines through. That said, I do appreciate there are some people who go, I've seen a gap in the market. We need this type of brand and it has to have this personality and it's absolutely nothing to do with me. But I've seen that gap and I'm going to make that brand. And, that can and does work as well. So, I think I prefer to work with brands where it is genuine and it's coming out of the team and they're trying to do something. But yeah, there's a place as well for creating a brand just because it fills a gap in the market.
Yeah, I don't know, if it fills that gap in the market, then there's going to be customers that are going to be interested in it, so it should kind of resonate with them. Do you
and
kind
also,
of
if you think, sorry, just to finish that point, if you think about it, right, if you're buying, I don't know, nails because you're a carpenter, like you literally do not care about like the brand personality, like nobody cares about that stuff. Like I think sometimes as marketers we can kind of over enthuse on those sorts of things, and we need to kind of be realistic about what is it exactly that the client or customer is looking for. And marketing is about 4 Ps, not just one. So it's not just the promotion, it is also, product, price, place are so important. And I just always think it's so unfair that marketers kind of go, people go, oh, here we go, marketers, do all the promoting. And you're like, it's like, you're not getting the results. It's like, yes, because the product is rubbish or because the price is wrong. Like that stuff has to be there. If that isn't there, then I don't think any amount of promotion is going to really work.
Yeah, well, it comes back to pain points as well, doesn't it? Is the product and the brand that resonates meeting those pain points of those customers? Because that's the most likely to kind of jump on. To your point there around a brand at those early stages and being, I suppose, kind of indie in that way, there's often a kind of view that it stands for something and a group of people, and it's maybe against another group because they're like with the incumbent, and that makes it feel like you're creating a bit of a tribe mentality, but it stands up within competition, especially if you're kind of a challenger product in that way. Do you think that again scales, or do you get to a stage where you need to be for a wider group of people and not pissing people off?
Yeah. I don't know. It's a tricky one. I definitely think you need to be brave about who your audience is and the problem that you're solving for them. Because so there's an amazing guy called David C. Baker, who wrote a book called The Business of Expertise. Now this obviously is very much around that specific expertise, and so he works a lot with kind of consultants and agencies and so on. But he's like, you shouldn't be, you should, if you buy a van for your business, you should be able to like have the side of the van with like what you do, and you shouldn't have it being magnetic and you're like popping another, every time you pull up at somebody's house, you're popping another sign on, because you're sort of changing who you are depending on who you're talking to. And I think that's a really good point, because the more focused you can be, we all know like personalization in marketing is becoming more and more important, right? We need to speak to specific people and we need to really understand them. That said, I don't know, I always go back to like the Tesco Love Stories campaign that they did a couple of years ago. And I just thought it was a fantastic campaign, because they were basically talking to literally everybody, absolutely anybody and everybody. But they were using specific stories. They just used lots and lots and lots of stories. So there was, the mum who's cooking her son's favorite meal because he's coming back from university, and there's a first date, and it's all about how food builds relationships. So, but it was showcasing lots of individual people in their own circumstances. So it was like, all different sizes and shapes of people and families. It was a very clever campaign.
Yeah, and if you can have that resonance with those group of people around that topic, then you're obviously going to kind of build engagement and awareness. So yeah, amazing. So I suppose question around, you obviously work with lots of different companies at that startup to scale up stage. In terms of people, so people in the team, what's your kind of thoughts, especially kind of working with agencies rather than in-house? Where does it, there are internal copywriters that you kind of work with? Are there other specialists that you work with and kind of your agency? How do you kind of see that from moving from a startup to a scale up?
So I think normally with early stage startups, we're working directly with founders, and they have no marketing support at all. So we're much more handholdy and helping them with a lot more on the sort of strategic side of things. Later on, it depends. So I think some people go down the route of hiring like a sort of a specialist, or a sort of generalist, to kind of in somebody who's, or might be a specialist in like strategic, but that kind of more broad overview, and then they pick and choose. And I think pick and choose in terms of who they then bring in as specialists. I think that can be really helpful, because especially in those early stages where you're experimenting a lot, there's a lot of experimentation within kind of early stage marketing. And then you kind of find a groove and you're like, do you know what? Actually, for our type of business, being on, I don't know, TikTok and Facebook is not really where it's at. We need to have like high quality content. We're really targeting, kind of the C-suite, and they really respond to kind of that thought leadership. So actually we're going to go down the route of content and then disseminating that through, maybe speaking engagements or webinars, or we're going to put some ad money behind it or whatever. So once you've sort of got into that groove and you've realized, like, broadly speaking, this handful of sort of specialisms or channels or tactics or whatever it is going to be what's key for us, that's when you would potentially start building that team in-house, and having content people or SEO people or whatever it is that you need.
And yeah, it's certainly interesting to see when we talk about kind of channels, finding those channels that work. I think it's often the case where kind of startups identify that there's specific channels that are creating, classic 80-20, the majority of the leads or the majority of the business, and how then they scale that up. Have you kind of seen any kind of clear examples of the companies that you work with where just content is just the best play and it's just got the best resonance, and how that worked?
Yeah, I'd say anything where you need to be seen as an expert, content is a fantastic way to demonstrate that. So for example, we worked with an organization called Blue Heart. They're a health tech brand. They started off within sex therapy. It's super fun because I get to say sex therapy a lot. And I spoke at Brighton SEO earlier this year, and my first words on stage in front of about 2,000 people were sex therapy. So there we go. That was super fun. But we worked with them creating SEO led content. But it was obviously, it's within health. They've got kind of the sex therapists that they work with within the business. It had to be high quality. It had to be, you had to be giving people great advice. It's a bit of the money or your life sort of situation. I mean, it wasn't sort of medical, but it was an interesting one, and they got really, really good results with that. And they were ranking really well. And because with that, it was capturing people who, I've got a problem with X, I'm not going to go and talk to anyone about it, so I'm going to jump on Google and I need to find answers, and then building that brand as being trusted advisors, and then great, download the app and we're now going to help you. So I think in that situation, that's really important. But that was a very clear, because it was B2C, it was sort of like low cost point. It's, you know, it's downloading an app, it's paying your monthly fee sort of thing. On the sort of, not flip side, but sort of at the other end of the scale, you've got in the sort of B2B space where you've got the very maybe complex products, high price points, long lead times, lots of stakeholders making those decisions. That's where content can be incredibly helpful, because you're actually going to get a lot of bang for your buck. It's not as quick. So with Blue Heart, we were putting a lot of content out, you know, high volumes, still high quality, but high volume as well. Within, you know, so maybe more thought leadership, you're putting more effort into maybe each piece of content. You may be creating like an annual report that's, you know, you've gone out and done research, and, you know, you go to UCover, it's like about 700 quid a question if you're, you know, doing that. So it's, you know, bigger investment, and it's longer lead time because it's building that brand. But then you have to sweat those assets. So I think then that's where the strategy changes. It's not like we're going to do one thing and lots and lots and lots of it. It's like, okay, we're going to have maybe a smaller volume of content, but now we're going to be really building campaigns around it. We're going to maybe have a launch event for our report. So we worked with them, a client with NDA'd, unfortunately I can't talk about who it is, but they did this report, and they now do it every year. And they have a big launch event, and then they get lots of PR off the back of it. They put a lot of ad spend behind it, and it is really effective. I think the last report that they did, they got, I think, 32 new clients off the back of it. So, you know, there's different ways to do it.
Yeah, and it's great that you can show those results. I think sometimes when you're building that kind of thought leadership, or you're building that awareness, it's harder to be able to show direct ROI potentially from it. Especially for the fact that if it's, you know, classic lead gen, it's either a free trial or something. It's kind of very clear in terms of you spend X to get Y, whereas that builds momentum over time. But yeah, it's really interesting to see the results. Are there any other kind of metrics or KPIs that you use, other than, you know, if you can see the direct customers and they can talk about it? But do you do kind of download? Do you tend to like gate content to be able to show it? Do you reference it anyway? I suppose it's like leading edge metrics that can show the success of the campaign, other than just the revenue at the end.
I do think that you need to be able to I always think with marketing budgets, right, that the marketing budget, if you're successful, like if the company's making more money, then the marketing's successful, right? Like, trust the marketing team that they'll tweak up and down the levers to make it work. But at the end of the day, I think that the senior leadership should just leave marketing alone, so long as they are, you know, it's like, right, our goal this year is 10% growth. Cool. Do we hit 10% growth? Yes, great. Leave me alone to do my job, you know. I think that would be the ideal scenario. But no, I think we always discuss, whenever we would do a project, we always talk about metrics at the beginning, and it's like, what does good look like to you? What do you need to see? And some of them, you know, they just want to be clearer about their own expertise. They just want to be able to communicate what's in their heads a bit better. And so actually just the process of creating content, you know, I always say writing is thinking. That's, for me, what I do. I write to think, to work out. I'm like, oh, I think I've got some thoughts. About a year ago, I was asked to speak on a panel or at an event about AI. And I was like, I don't know anything about AI. I don't want to know anything about AI. Fine. Anyway, so I started writing, and then I realized actually there was a lot that I did already know. And it was interesting to see how it fit with the expertise that I have. So then my presentation was a little bit about how we've been experimenting, because obviously we have to do it. But also it was about noise and cynicism, which are two really big problems within content, and how AI was going to impact that. So that process of writing for my talk was really helpful. And I think that's what a lot of people get out of it. So sometimes it isn't a metric you can write down, or other times, you know, people just be like, oh, people keep saying to me, oh yeah, you're posting loads on LinkedIn, it's really good, you know. It's that anecdotal evidence. But yeah, it will be different for everyone.
it's trying to get that kind of qual stuff out of people and kind of show when they've mentioned it, because that can be super powerful. And
Yeah.
it's often in terms of attribution, that level of content is benefiting other channels because
Yeah.
it's helping at early stages potentially higher up in the funnel, and other channels take advantage for like further down. So
It's really annoying. Sometimes when, like, a web design company, like, look, we've made this amazing website, it's getting the results. I'm like, we did the copy, just saying, and there are definitely some channels that kind of get all the glory, especially if you think about brand messaging work and kind of value proposition, all of your advertising. So, you've got your PPC agency. It's like, we're getting great results on the ad. It's like, cool. But also that had to have excellent messaging kind of coming into it. The value proposition had to be there. And actually all of marketing, we're all linked, right? Like, and sales. At the end of the day, if one bit's not working, that's the gap, right? So it's almost like a circuit, like a sort of, I know nothing about electronics, but do you know what I mean? It's like fairy lights on a Christmas tree, like if one of the things is wrong, the rest of it's not going to work. So yeah, I really need to work on that analogy because I don't know any of the names of the bits.
I like the fairy lights example, certainly. If one bit isn't working, everything turns off. And yeah, it works in terms of feedback between different departments and not working in silos.
Yeah.
And the classic view is sales and marketing in that situation as well, with sales blaming marketing, marketing blaming sales.
Yeah.
Have you kind of seen that in your world, again, moving kind of startup to scale up, where companies get bigger, things kind of breaking in departments, and how recommendations of things working smoothly to get the best results?
It is a tricky one. I mean, we always try and bring sales into our kickoffs whenever we do projects, because they're the ones on the ground, and if they're struggling with something, that's the first thing we need to fix. Like, if you're looking at the funnel, I know it's not really a funnel, but imagine that it actually works like a funnel and the bottom's blocked. There's no point pouring more into the top. That's pointless. So we always do try and work with that. So things like objection handling. If we can create content that handles common objections, that's going to be way more powerful than getting more people onto the website, sort of thing, to start with, and then we move to that. So yeah, and I think if you do that, if sales and marketing can speak to each other, if marketing can see themselves as being, like teeing up ready for sale, that doesn't make them less important. Sales isn't more important because they close the deal. Excuse me. But it's working together and making sure that it actually does make sense, so that sales is feeding back to marketing and saying, oh, marketing, rather than going, oh, you're the coloring in department. No, marketing, can you create like this amazing collateral for me, because I'm going to this event and I want to talk to people, and I don't know, we're going to be at an event. There's a table with some salespeople. The MD's doing a presentation, right? So now you've got some content, we've got maybe some thought leadership, right? At the end of that, you've got a QR code where you can download some content. Brilliant. They go and speak to the sales team. The sales team's having a conversation. A key topic comes up, and that salesperson will be like, oh, do you know what? I'll follow. We've got a blog post on that. We've got a download on that. I'll follow up afterwards and I'll send it to you because that's really helpful, right? No salesperson wants to be phoning up going, hi, can I have some money? Whereas if you can follow up and be like, oh, I've got something useful for you, that's a brilliant way of staying in touch. It's a great way of building relationship. So yeah, I think sales and marketing should and can, and yeah, definitely do feed each other. It's mindset. Again, culture, so important.
And I think it's super smart what you're saying there about bringing sales teams into the initial kickoffs and conversations, because I think sometimes it's like, oh, marketing are going away and creating this kind of content, and then they're going to come back, and that's going to help the sales process. Well, the sales guys go, well, that's completely irrelevant to what we're doing.
Yeah.
Or actually, that's not going to help me to get to the next stage or open up discussions within the decision-making set. Then, but if they're there and saying this would be super valuable, this would be useful, then even like the formats of the content, I think is really interesting, useful.
Yeah, and I mean, even product, if it's sort of in tech, having the product, we work with one client where we work with the head of content, and we also work with the product marketing lead, and that's really helpful as well, because we've sort of got the combination of brand and technical, which is important. Because this is the thing, like a marketer might be like, right, our audience really cares about this, and this is our brand, and this is what we're saying to the world, and then the sales team are like, they just want to know about price. That's all they care about. And it's like, okay, so how are we going to make that work?
I think as well, getting product involved is sometimes there's, you know, what I often hear going called the marketing site, and then there's the app or the product. And if those things aren't aligned, or is that a separation, customer doesn't care, but there's, you know, people, you know, beavering away on something which then looks different or feels different to the marketing site. So yeah, I do have to ask you as well, there's there, because you did mention it as well, about the lovely topic of AI, which I know is massively buzzy. You know, and how it is affecting or influencing content in that way. I think, I suppose that, you know, often the case of a startup moving to scale up, they'll think about moving to efficiencies of scale, or how they can use as many tools as possible to be able to scale up in that way. But there is obviously the dangers of AI in terms of its use and production and quality. So interesting to know what you think about them.
Yeah, I definitely don't think it's up to the quality it needs to be in terms of like, yeah, brilliant, it's now a part of my team and it can create my content. It's just not there yet, but I'm not saying that it won't get there. So I'm conscious of the change. I was listening to, I went to the MailChimp event a couple of weeks ago in London, and that was really interesting. Lots of kind of talks about that. And there was some stat about like when microprocessors in computers, they were like, I don't know, doubling in capacity every like 6 months or something. And they were basically saying the equivalent for AI is just off the charts more. So like the amount of it will be able to do again in 6 months, we can't even imagine it. So I know that there's a lot of change coming. I think there's some negative things. Some people are going, great, we don't need content, let's just use ChatGPT or whatever. And it isn't working and it's lowering the bar, and there's just a lot of crap out there, which is sad. And I'm not just ChatGPT, but just sort of everywhere, you know, like whenever I go to message somebody on LinkedIn, excuse me, 1 second. Frog in the throat, I've had a bit of cough. But you know, it suggests the first line of what I can say to the person, and it's always just such generic drivel. It's like, oh my God, I just honestly, like somebody gave me a personality lobotomy. It's just not, it's not okay. But that said, I think it is a powerful tool, and I think that it can be used for lots of things. So as an example of where it worked quite well, we were doing a client briefing, and the client is quite a techie person, and they wanted to organize their thoughts in advance, so they used AI to help them do that. And it kind of just gave us a bit of a shortcut, because they could just provide us with that in advance. And then we still needed to have the conversation to dig beneath that, but it was a starting point for our knowledge. So I definitely think there's a fantastic lady, I don't know if you've come across her, Kerry Harrison, and she's a copywriter as well, and she really knows her stuff with AI. She's an AI kind of trainer. And she talks about the AI sandwich. So you've got to like layer it between what the AI can do and what you can do, and work together. And I think if humans work with machines, then that's great. But I don't know if you've seen that classic meme that keeps getting shared, where it's like, I want AI to do my like laundry so I can do art, not do art so I can do laundry. And it's that sort of thing. I think we should be making sure that AI is doing the stuff we don't want to do, rather than it taking over the stuff that we do, that we are good at. Like, we're humans, we're creative, we should be doing that. We think outside the box. Like, let's not make robots do that. That's crazy.
I like the concept of the AI sandwich then.
Yes, yeah, no, it's good. The other thing, I was at an event, and Dr. Margaret Heffernan was speaking. She's absolutely incredible. I blimmin' love that woman, and she's just so like, yeah. Anyway, you have to look at her TED talk. She's great. But she said something about basically there's some statistic that you cannot accurately predict the future beyond about 400 days. So it's essentially just over a year. And so really, we can't know what AI is going to do. But what we can do is we can say how we want the world to look. So what do we want? Do we want writers to disappear? Like, I mean, I don't think we do. I don't. I like writing. So yeah, so many things. Who knows? It will be an interesting ride.
Yeah. That's a great way to summarize it as well.
Yeah.
Ren, we're out of time. Thank you so much for your time. It's really interesting insight. What I normally do is kind of finish off the conversation just by kind of asking if there's one kind of golden nugget or really kind of useful information that you'd recommend to the founders or to companies that are moving from a startup to scale up, what would you suggest?
Bring in advisors, and then trust them. Definitely. You know, if you're going to go to like, or don't, one or the other. Do you know what I mean? If you want to do it your way, that's fine. Do it your way. You'll learn from your mistakes, and that'll be great. And then you'll have new skills, and that'll be fantastic. But otherwise, just bring in advisors, and then, yeah, just trust them, because if you've got a specialist, they know what they're doing. By all means, push back, have that back and forth. But yeah, do trust the experts.
Makes sense. Well, look, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Lovely to be here.
And speak to you soon.
Yeah, speak soon.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers, Ed.
Bye.